From the very beginning, I knew where I stood in my family. My brother, Daniel, was the golden child, the one everyone praised, the one who seemed to shine in every room he walked into. Teachers loved him, relatives adored him, and my parents treated him like he could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was always the shadow, the quiet one, the one who never seemed to measure up, no matter how hard I tried. When we were little, the differences between us might have seemed small to an outsider, but to me, they were everything. Daniel had the brand new clothes, the shiny shoes that never had a scuff mark, the best toys money could buy. I wore hand-me-downs that were 2 sizes too big, shirts with faded logos, and sneakers that had holes in the soles. Whenever I complained, my parents would brush it off. It doesn't matter what you wear, they'd say. But when it came to Daniel, suddenly it did matter. He had to look his best. He had to be presentable because he was the pride of the family. At school, the favoritism only fueled Daniel's arrogance. He'd strut down the hall with his expensive backpack while I tried to keep my broken zipper closed with a safety pin. He'd laugh at me in front of his friends, mocking the way I looked, the way I spoke, even the way I carried my books. "Look at him," he'd say, his voice dripping with ridicule. "He looks like a charity case." His friends would erupt in laughter while I stood there, cheeks burning, fists clenched, wishing I could disappear. One memory is burned into my mind more than any other. It was the night of the school talent show. I had practiced for weeks, planning to play the piano piece I had been working on in secret. It was the one thing I thought I could be good at, the one thing that could make my parents proud of me for once. But just before it was my turn to go on stage, Daniel leaned over and whispered, "Don't embarrass yourself. Everyone knows you're just not good enough." Those words sank into me like poison. My hand shook so badly on the keys that I completely fumbled my performance. The audience clapped politely, but the laughter I heard as I walked off stage echoed louder than any applause. Daniel had stolen that moment from me without even trying. It wasn't just at school or on stage. At home, the divide was even more obvious. At dinner, my parents would ask Daniel about his grades, his sports achievements, his friends. With me, the conversation was short and dismissive. "Did you finish your homework?" That was it. No deeper questions. No real interest. It was as if I didn't exist unless I failed. And then it was just another excuse to compare me to Daniel. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" That was the refrain of my childhood. I remember one particular birthday. I must have been 10 years old. Daniel had just turned 12, and for his birthday, he got a brand new bicycle. It was red, shiny, with gears that clicked smoothly and tires that looked like they could race across the world. When my birthday came 2 months later, I was handed a used backpack. Not even new used. "It's practical," my mother said, smiling as if that explained everything. Daniel smirked at me, riding circles around the yard on his new bike while I sat there, clutching a second-hand bag that wasn't even my favorite color. The message was clear. He was worth the investment. IWAS and single quotas. As the years passed, Daniel only grew bolder. He wasn't satisfied with just being the favorite. He had to remind me of it constantly. "You'll never be anything," he'd sneer. "Face it, you're just going to end up broke, working some dead-end job while I'm living the good life." His words stung because, deep down, part of me believed them. I had been told my whole life that I was less, that I wasn't enough. And when you hear something like that over and over, it starts to feel like the truth. But even in those darkest moments, when I wanted to give up, when I wanted to accept that Daniel was destined for greatness while I was destined for scraps, a small fire burned inside me. It was faint at first, just a spark, but every insult he hurled, every smirk he flashed, every time my parents overlooked me, it grew stronger. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I swore to myself that one day, somehow, I would prove them all wrong. I would show Daniel that the brother he mocked, the one he laughed at, the one he thought would never be anything, would be the one he'd have to answer to. And that vow, that silent promise I made to myself, was the beginning of everything. Growing up under Daniel's shadow wasn't just painful, it was exhausting. While he basked in praise, I carried the weight of constant comparison. Teachers, relatives, even neighbors would say the same thing. Daniel is so smart, so talented, so promising. And then they'd look at me with that sympathetic smile, the kind that says they don't expect much. At first, I tried to fight against it, but eventually, I began to accept the role I'd been cast in, the underdog, the disappointment, the one who was supposed to fail. When high school came round, Daniel only widened the gap. He joined sports teams, effortlessly aced his classes, and dated the most popular girl in school. I worked part-time at the local grocery store just to have some spending money. Every paycheck went into helping cover small things: bus fare, cheap clothes, the occasional fast food meal when I couldn't face another night of beans and rice. Daniel would laugh when he saw me come home in my faded green apron. "Look at you," he'd sneer, tossing his varsity jacket onto the couch, bagging groceries while I'm out winning games. "You really are a nobody." My parents didn't defend me. In fact, they seemed to agree. When I came home late after a long shift, my mother would sigh, "Why can't you be more like Daniel? He has time for school, sports, and friends. You just work." But what they didn't understand was that working wasn't a choice. It was survival. While Daniel's expenses were covered without question, I had to earn every dollar I spent. I wasn't jealous of him anymore. I was angry. Angry at the unfairness. Angry at the way they all seemed blind to how hard I was fighting just to exist. There were nights I cried in silence, staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe Daniel was right. Maybe I really was destined for nothing. But deep down, that same fire that sparked in my childhood still burned. Every insult added fuel. Every laugh pushed me harder. The real turning point came during my senior year. Daniel had just been accepted into a prestigious university. My parents threw him a party, showering him with gifts and praise. Meanwhile, I sat at the corner of the table and noticed, eating a slice of cake that didn't even taste sweet anymore. I hadn't been accepted anywhere. My grades weren't spectacular, and with no money for tuition, college seemed impossible. That night, Daniel cornered me in the kitchen, grinning. "What's your plan now? Going to be a cashier forever? Maybe I'll hire you one day to clean my office." He laughed so hard he nearly dropped his soda. That was the moment I realized something crucial. No one was coming to save me. Not my parents, not luck, not some miracle. If I wanted to change my life, I had to do it myself. So I started working harder. I picked up extra shifts at the grocery store, then added a second job at a gas station. While Daniel partied at college, I was stacking shelves until midnight, mopping floors, counting pennies. I was exhausted, but I was also learning something valuable: discipline, the value of every dollar, the importance of persistence. And slowly, very slowly, I started saving. But life didn't make it easy. My car broke down, draining my tiny savings. Medical bills from an injury at work nearly wiped me out. Landlords threatened eviction when I couldn't make rent. Every time I felt like I was taking a step forward, something shoved me 2 steps back. And through it all, Daniel kept mocking. "Still poor, still struggling. Man, it's pathetic. I don't know why you even try." Yet even in the darkest moments, I refused to give in. I began to read during my breaks: business books, finance guides, anything I could get my hands on. While Daniel wasted nights at bars, I studied. I taught myself how money worked, how businesses grew, how people went from nothing to everything. One night, while restocking shelves, I overheard 2 businessmen talking about investments. It sparked something inside me. What if I could make my money work for me? The idea sounded ridiculous at first. I barely had enough to cover rent, let alone invest. But I kept researching, kept learning, kept dreaming. Daniel, of course, laughed when he found out. Investing? With what money? You couldn't even buy a decent car. Face it, you're destined to be broke forever. His laughter echoed in my head. But instead of breaking me, it hardened me. I swore I would prove him wrong, no matter how long it took. And then, just when things seemed unbearable, opportunity knocked out. It wasn't obvious at first. Just a friend who mentioned a small startup looking for people willing to work hard for a little pay, but high potential. Most people turn it down who wanted to take that kind of risk. But I saw something in it. A chance to finally step out of the cycle of endless struggle. So, I took the leap. I left the safety of my dead-end jobs and threw myself into the unknown. It was terrifying. The pay was low, the hours were brutal, and failure loomed over me like a storm cloud. Daniel mocked me relentlessly. You quit your jobs for some dumb dream? Whoa, you've officially hit rock bottom. Maybe I had. Or maybe, just maybe, I had finally found the path out. Because deep down, I knew one thing. The only way to silence Daniel and everyone else who doubted me was to succeed where they least expected it. Walking into that startup for the first time felt like stepping into another world. Gone were the fluorescent lights of the grocery store and the greasy smell of the gas station. Instead, I found myself in a cramped office buzzing with energy, cluttered with wires, whiteboards filled with scribbles, and a handful of people who actually believed they could build something from nothing. I didn't know it then, but that room would change the trajectory of my life. The startup was tiny, barely surviving. My official title was Operations Assistant, which was just a fancy way of saying I did everything no one else wanted to do. I made coffee, ran errands, answered emails, handled customer complaints, even fixed the printer when it jammed. The pay was laughable, so small it made my parents roll their eyes when I told them. Daniel outright mocked me. You left steady jobs for this? He said, grinning. Unpaid intern work with a bunch of nerds. Man, you really don't know how the real world works. Keep dreaming, little brother. I'll let you clean my office one day when I'm rich. Those words stung. But they didn't crush me, because while Daniel mocked, I was learning. Every task I did, no matter how small, taught me something. I watched how the founders pitched to investors. I studied how they handled setbacks. I asked questions no one else bothered to ask. And slowly, I started contributing ideas of my own. At first, no one took me seriously. I was just the coffee guy. But one day, I noticed a flaw in our logistics process and suggested a cheaper, faster way to handle it. The team tried it, and it worked. From that day forward, I wasn't just the coffee guy, I was someone with ideas worth listening to. But success didn't come overnight. In fact, failure became my constant companion. The startup nearly collapsed 3 times in the first year. There were nights I stayed at the office until dawn, fixing problems I barely understood, fueled only by instant noodles and determination. I poured everything I had into that company, my time, my energy, even the tiny savings I had scraped together. Daniel loved to remind me of my failures. Still broke, still wasting your time on that garbage company. You should have listened to me. You're never going to make it. His laughter over the phone would echo in my ears as I sat in the office, staring at a computer screen, wondering if he was right. But then I'd remember the years of humiliation, the birthdays forgotten, the taunts, the way he strutted around like he owned the world. And I would push harder. After 2 brutal years, everything changed. We landed a major client, one deal that tripled our revenue overnight. Suddenly, investors who once ignored us were calling nonstop. The office that had once felt like a crumbling shack transformed into a buzzing hub of activity. New hires came in, more projects rolled out, and with each success, my role grew. I wasn't just fixing printers anymore. I was managing teams, leading meetings, shaping strategies. But even then, I didn't flaunt it. I didn't post about it online. I didn't tell my parents. I certainly didn't tell Daniel. I wanted him to keep thinking of me as the failure, the loser, the kid bagging groceries. I wanted the reveal to hit him like a thunderbolt when the time was right. Still, it wasn't smooth sailing. Growth brought its own problems, tight deadlines, fierce competition, sleepless nights filled with doubt. There were moments when it seemed like everything might collapse again. But this time, I wasn't scared. I had found my place. I had discovered something that no insult could take away. I had worth. Meanwhile, Daniel's life wasn't as perfect as he made it seem. The prestigious university that once gave him bragging rights became a burden when his grades slipped. He bounced between majors, never really committing, always chasing the easy path. And while he still mocked me, I started noticing the cracks in his arrogance. He was living off our parents, racking up debt, while I was quietly building something real. Then, after years of grinding, the moment came. The company exploded. We went from a scrappy startup to a recognized name in the industry. Our revenue multiplied. Investors poured in millions, and I wasn't just an employee anymore, I was part owner. My stake in the company made me wealthier than I had ever dreamed possible. I bought my first car that wasn't secondhand, then my first home, and with every milestone, I kept silent, waiting, because I knew sooner or later, Daniel would come face to face with the truth. And that moment arrived when I got a notification one quiet afternoon. A job application. The name on it made my heart stop. Daniel, he had no idea whose desk his resume had landed on. The day I saw Daniel's resume sitting in my inbox, I almost laughed out loud. My brother, the same man who had mocked me for being poor, who had spent his entire life reminding me that I'd never amount to anything, was now applying for a job at my company. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. But no, his name, his address, his email, it was all there, staring at me in black and white. For a long moment, I just sat at my desk, staring at the screen, a mix of emotions flooding through me. Part of me felt anger. This was the same brother who had spit on every dream I ever had, and now he wanted me to hand him an opportunity. Another part of me felt vindicated. After all the years of humiliation, the tables had finally turned, and buried beneath it all, there was a quiet satisfaction, proof that no matter what he had said, I had risen higher than he could have ever imagined. Daniel had no idea I was behind the company he was applying to. He didn't know that the kid he called a loser, the charity case he mocked, had built something so successful that people like him were now knocking at its doors. He was desperate. His resume screamed it. A long list of unfinished jobs, gaps in employment and experience that looked good on paper but lacked real substance. My once golden brother wasn't so golden anymore. I called a meeting with my executive team to review the applications. When Daniel's came up, I stayed silent, letting the others speak first. Some thought he was worth interviewing. Others weren't impressed. Finally, someone asked, "Should we bring him in?" I leaned back in my chair, hiding my smirk. "Yes," I said calmly. "Let's interview him." The day of the interview arrived. I sat in my office, waiting, heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. I heard the receptionist greet him, the shuffle of footsteps in the hallway, and then the door opened, and there he was, Daniel, dressed in a suit that was just a little too tight, his confident smirk replaced by nervous determination. For a moment, he didn't recognize me. He glanced at me, confused, then blinked hard. "Wait, you?" he stammered, his voice trembling. "Yes," I said, leaning back in my chair with deliberate calm. "Welcome to my company, Daniel. Please, have a seat." The color drained from his face. He looked like someone had just pulled the ground out from beneath him. For the first time in my life, I watched my brother struggle for words. This was the same man who had always been quick with a jab, always ready with an insult, always so sure of himself. Now, he sat across from me, silent, his hands fidgeting as he tried to process the reality in front of him. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it stretch, savoring every second. Years of mockery, years of humiliation, years of being the forgotten one, it all led to this moment. And I wanted him to feel every ounce of it. So I finally said, breaking the tension, "You're applying for a position here. Tell me why I should hire you." He swallowed hard, stammering through his rehearsed lines about his experience and dedication. But I could see the cracks. His confidence was gone, replaced by desperation. He needed this job, and he knew it. The power dynamic had flipped completely. He was no longer the older brother towering over me, mocking me for my hand-me-down clothes, an empty wallet. He was the one asking for a chance, and I was the one holding all the cards. Over the next few weeks, as he went through the hiring process, I watched him squirm. He had to sit in meetings where people praised me, where my name carried weight and respect. He had to walk past employees who looked at me with admiration, not pity. Every day was a reminder that the brother he once ridiculed was now the man in charge. When he finally got the offer letter, he signed it without hesitation. And just like that, Daniel became my employee. It was surreal. Watching him walk into the office each day, knowing that every paycheck he received came from the company I helped build. The same brother who once told me I'd never be anything was now working under me. At first, he tried to act like it didn't bother him. He joked with coworkers, kept his head high, pretended everything was normal. But I could see it in his eyes. Every time he had to address me as sir, every time he had to follow my directives, every time he saw my name at the top of an email chain, it ate at him. And the truth was, I hadn't even decided yet how I was going to handle him. Part of me wanted to crush him, to humiliate him the way he had humiliated me. Another part of me wondered if maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to finally learn humility. But one thing was certain. Daniel's world had flipped upside down, and he had no one to blame but himself. It didn't take long for word to spread. News has a way of traveling fast in families, and once Daniel realized the depth of my position, he couldn't keep it a secret anymore. At first, he tried to downplay it. "Yeah, my brother works here," he told our parents one night over dinner. He spoke casually, as if I were just another mid-level employee. But my mother raised an eyebrow. "Works there? I heard he's one of the executives." Daniel froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Executives?" he said weakly. "Yes," she replied. "A neighbor's son told me. Apparently, the company he's at has been in the papers lately. They said his name was listed as part of the ownership team." The silence that fell over that dinner table was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. My parents, who had spent years brushing me aside, were now staring at me as if they'd never really seen me before. Daniel's face turned red, his jaw clenched. For the first time in my life, the balance had shifted and everyone knew it. He tried to laugh it off. "Ownership, please. It's probably just some minor stake. Don't get carried away." But deep down, he knew. He had seen the respect I commanded at work, the authority I carried, the way others looked at me. He couldn't deny it anymore. A week later, my parents visited me at my office. They had never set foot there before, never cared about what I was building. But now, curiosity, or maybe guilt, drove them to see it for themselves. When they walked in, escorted past security, and greeted by staff who treated me with deference, their eyes widened. They toured the floors, met employees who praised my leadership, and sat in a conference room that bore my name on the wall. "My son," my father whispered, almost to himself. "You built this." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was right in front of them. Daniel, meanwhile, was crumbling. Every day at work was a reminder of the new order. He couldn't strut, couldn't mock, couldn't pretend to be superior. He was just another employee, and worse, he was mine. The bitterness ate at him. Sometimes I'd catch him glaring at me in meetings, his fists clenched under the table. Other times, he'd avoid me entirely, slipping out of rooms the moment I walked in. The breaking point came during a quarterly meeting. The entire staff had gathered, and I was presenting the company's latest achievements. Charts lit up the big screen. Applause echoed through the room. And when I announced a new expansion project, the place erupted. Daniel sat near the back, his face pale, his hands gripping the edge of his chair. When the meeting ended, employees crowded around me, shaking my hand, congratulating me. Daniel lingered until the room emptied, then stormed up to me. His voice trembled, low but sharp. "How did you do it?" he hissed. "How did you go from nothing to this?" It doesn't make sense. I looked him straight in the eye. Maybe because while you were busy mocking me, I was busy building. The words hit him like a slap. He staggered back, his mouth opening, no sound coming out. For once, he had no clever retort, no insult to throw, just silence. That night, he showed up at my house unannounced. Gone was the arrogance, the mocking grin. He looked small, desperate. I need your help, he said quietly, his eyes downcast. I'm in debt. My degree didn't lead anywhere. I've been lying to everyone, telling them I'm doing great. But the truth is, I'm drowning. Hearing those words from Daniel was surreal. This was the same brother who had laughed at my struggles, who had reveled in my failures. And now, here he was, confessing his own. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered every humiliation, every cruel word, every time he had looked at me like I was less than nothing. And the fire that had fueled me all those years reignited. Why should I help you? I asked, my voice steady. When I needed support, you mocked me. When I was struggling, you left. When I had nothing, you reminded me of it every single day. So tell me, Daniel, why should I lift you up now? He had no answer. His eyes brimmed with tears. His shoulders slumped. For the first time in our lives, he was the one begging, and I was the one deciding his fate. Daniel sat across from me, his head bowed, shoulders hunched, hands trembling slightly as he clasped them together. The same brother who once towered over me with arrogance, who had mocked every failure, now looked like a man who had lost everything. In that moment, I realized just how far we had both come. He had lived his whole life certain of his superiority, convinced that he was destined to win, and I, the so-called disappointment, the forgotten child, had become the one with the power to decide his future. 1,000 memories ran through my mind. The laughter in the school hallway when he mocked my clothes, the humiliation at the talent show when his whispered words broke me before I even began, the birthday when he rode circles on his brand new bike while I clutched a second-hand backpack, and the countless nights I lay awake, replaying his taunts, wondering if he was right. All of it came rushing back, not as pain this time, but as fuel, proof of the fire that had carried me here. I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp. All those years, Daniel, you told me I'd never be anything. You made sure I never forgot it. And now here you are, sitting in my house, asking me for help. Do you see the irony? He swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the floor. I was stupid, he muttered. I didn't know. I didn't think. No, I interrupted. You didn't care. You wanted me small. You wanted me beneath you. And now, you want me to lift you up. For a long time, I considered it. I weighed the satisfaction of revenge against the possibility of redemption. I thought about crushing him, about sending him away with nothing, letting him feel the sting of rejection the way I had felt it for years. Part of me craved that. Part of me wanted to see him suffer as I had suffered. But then another part of me, smaller, quieter, but insistent, whispered something else. That maybe the greatest revenge wasn't destroying him. Maybe it was forcing him to live with the truth that the brother he had mocked was the one who saved him. That every paycheck, every meal on his table, every chance at survival came from me. That he could no longer deny who I had become. So I gave him a choice. You'll keep working at the company, I said firmly, but not because I'm doing you a favor. You'll work because you need to learn humility. You'll start at the bottom. No special treatment. No shortcuts. You'll do the work, earn the respect, and prove you're worth the salary you're being paid. And every time you sign your name on that paycheck, you'll remember whose name is on the line above it. Daniel's lips trembled. He wanted to argue, to resist, but he couldn't. He nodded, defeated. Okay, he whispered. I'll do it. And he did, day after day. I watched him struggle through tasks that others half his age managed with ease. I watched him swallow his pride when younger employees gave him instructions. I watched him choke on the reality that his survival depended entirely on the brother he once considered worthless. Our parents, meanwhile, could no longer hide their guilt. They visited me more often now, trying to bridge the years of neglect with awkward compliments and shallow praise. But I didn't need it anymore. Their validation, once the thing I craved most, had lost its power over me. I didn't need their pride. I had built my own. One evening, after a long day at work, I stood in my office alone, looking out at the city skyline. The lights stretched endlessly, each one representing a life, a story, a struggle. I thought about the boy I once was, the boy in the hand-me-down shoes, the boy mocked by his own family, the boy who vowed in silence that one day things would change. And I realized I had kept that vow, that Daniel would never be the same. My parents would never see me the same way again. And I had become something none of them expected, the one in control. That as I shut off the lights and locked the door behind me, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile, because the brother who once mocked me for being poor now worked for me. And every single day, he had to live with the truth that nobody was his boss.